Hello, hi friends, welcome back to First Gen Money, a YouTube channel for all things money and lifestyle from a first gen millennial's perspective. We're approaching the new year. I know a lot of us are thinking about, okay, New Year's resolutions, what goals, what money goals do I have for 2023? If paying off your debt is on that list of things you want to get done, things you want to achieve in 2023, and even if it's not, but you do have high interest debt, then maybe it'll be a goal after this video. But if it is a goal, if it potentially is a goal for you, then this is going to be a great video for you because we're going to talk about how do you create a plan to actually pay off the debt that you have, that you want to pay off. I want to first look at what's happening in the greater economy, what's happening right now that impacts our decision to make this a priority for us or not. The Federal Reserve is increasing interest rates. So this is something that's been happening since the beginning of the year. In order to drive consumer behavior, the Federal Reserve has been slowly increasing interest rates because we have been seeing high inflation, and their goal is really to get inflation back down to 2%, where right now we're at 7-8%, which is wild. Their way of doing that is by increasing interest rates, which in turn increases the rates that we have when we want to borrow money. So you'll be hearing a lot of mortgage rates have increased, which is why the housing demand is not so high, even though honestly I'm on Zillow still. I'm these prices have not gone down. Last year, people were getting mortgages at 2% or 2.8, 3%. Now people are looking at mortgages that are 6%, 7%. And while that doesn't sound like a big difference, in a big purchase like a house, it's almost doubling the interest rate and increasing payments enough to make people not think that it makes sense for them to purchase homes. The Federal Reserve has been increasing interest rates, and it'll probably continue to do so. We will find out, I believe, next Friday or maybe this Friday if they're going to increase it again. That's something that we need to understand that is happening to anything that has a interest rate. So this is great for our savings. My Ally account has been, increasing week over week. They're now we're 2.5%, now we're, and I'm great, but it does the reverse for other things, for when you need to borrow money. Second thing, which is tied to the first thing, there have been talks about it for at least over a year at this point, that we are entering or will be entering a recession in 2023. That is just something to keep in mind. Last week, I did a video on things to prepare for, what happens if we go into a recession. And one of those things is paying off your debt. But why pay off your debt to prepare for a recession? Why is that even something that we should be thinking about when it comes to recession? Because debt is expensive. Debt takes money from our monthly income, from the monthly things that we need to pay for. So if we can remove certain debts and have more available cash on hand on a monthly basis, we are helping ourselves out. Having that context of, okay, we might be going into one, how do I set myself up as best as I can? And one of those ways being paying off my high interest debt so that I have more money for myself on a monthly basis and not to go to these, wherever you have your debt, your high interest debt. The third one, and I will not be talking about student loan debt in this video, but I did want to add that into this context because the government just extended the federal student loan payment pause until, or rather through June of 2023. So now we have 6 months into the new year that we are not going to be making payments towards student loan debt. And if you were preparing to put $200 aside for that student loan payment that you had planned to start in the new year, and now you have 6 months, what can you do with those funds instead to maybe put them into paying off your high interest debt? So that's kind of why I share that in this context, because student loan debt, when compared to a credit card or a auto loan, is going to have a smaller interest rate, especially if it's a federal loan. I know when I had student loan debt, mine hovered at like the highest was probably 3.5%. When we compare that to a credit card, which the average is like 17%, there's a big difference there. And so we're gonna get into that in the steps of like, how do you compare like what something costs versus the other debt that you have. But it's something to keep in mind. If you were planning on making payments to your student loan debt and now that has been extended through June, then could you use those funds for something like your high interest debt? That's what's happening in the US economy today that makes it a perfect time to be considering and paying off high interest debt in your goals for 2023, especially because of point number one. The increased interest rates might continue to happen. And if your credit card interest rate is also increasing and you have a balance, then you are paying more in that credit card than you were last year. So just keep that in mind. Seems like the best time to really be thinking about your debt payoff journey, or your high interest debt payoff journey, I should say. So you've gotten this far, you realize I want to prioritize paying off my high interest debt in 2023. How do I start? Of course, you want to pay off your debt and still continue to live your life. You don't want to put your life on hold because you have high interest debt. We're not saying you're never going to go out, you're never going to do anything fun until you pay off this debt. It's a punishment. This is not the kind of language that we use on this channel, but I will say there are going to be some give and takes. So you're not going to be able to have it all at once, right? You can't pay off all the debt. You can't pay off every single one of them and also do all the things that you want to do. So you have to like be willing to move some things around and say, I'm going to prioritize this for this month, and then I have this trip planned, like I need to go out. It's all about compromise, really. You have to figure out with yourself what matters to you and put some things right now just to the side so you can make room to have extra funds to pay off this debt. Before you start looking at all the debts that you have, you need to understand, are you in the position to be going hard on your high interest debt when you don't have an emergency fund or money to fall back on if something were to happen? So why is this even on here when we're talking about paying off debt? It's on here because if something does happen and you have been for the last 3 months like go on paying off your debt, something with your car needs to get fixed and you don't have the funds in cash to pay for it, then you're going back to putting them on a credit card. And I don't mean don't put it on a credit card and like get points and all that stuff. That's totally separate. If you are on a goal to pay off the high interest debt because you have accumulated the debt and there's a balance and it's been sitting there and you haven't been paying it off in full, then continuing to add to that debt is just gonna continue the cycle. And so when you give yourself a buffer of space to have those life things happen, then you're less reliant on swiping your credit card. Once you have covered your emergency fund, you have 3 to 6, I'm on the more, let's be conservative side and say like 6 months of living expenses. But just to start off, I think you're fine with 3 and continuing to add it. But anyway, once you've gotten your emergency fund, you're good to go there. You're going to want to make a list of your debts. So you can obviously do this before you have saved 3 months of living expenses. I created a spreadsheet. I will link it in the description for you to kind of use to go through this. But basically what you're going to be doing is you are making a list of all your debts. You are listing every single one of them, the type of debt that it is. Is it a credit card? Is it a student loan? Is it auto loan? Mortgage, all of your debts, even the ones that, we might not be tackling for 2023, but just list them out. Then list out the minimum payments, what you have to pay per month required on that debt. You also want to put in another column the interest rate. How much interest are you paying towards that debt? How much do you have in this debt? Like how much do you owe right now? What is your outstanding balance? And then you are going to put the limit that you have. So For something like a mortgage, like you wouldn't have a limit. But for a credit card, maybe your balance is $3,000 and your limit is $10,000. The limit and the balance is going to be different numbers unless it's something fixed, like a mortgage or a student loan. It's not like a credit card. Listing this out is helpful because you're able to see all of your debts. And yes, even the ones we're not tackling for 2023, because that way you can understand like why maybe you aren't tackling the mortgage debt that you have and why you need to start prioritizing actually the credit card debt because you have a 17% interest rate, whereas your car loan or something else has a 3%, a 5%. Big differences. Listing it out, once that's done, I want you to highlight, if you're using Google Sheets, just highlight the row with the highest interest rates. That could be just one, that could be two, you can have a few of those, but just highlight the ones that have an interest rate in the double digits. Once you've done that, we're gonna go into understanding how much is this debt costing you. And what I mean by that is how much are you paying the bank or the credit card company that is lending you this money for them to lend you this money. This is kind of like the, oh my God, I realize I'm paying and giving these banks like all this money moment. And it's helpful for us to see this so that we can put it in perspective. Before we do that though, I wanted to share something about credit card companies. Credit card companies make the money, they make most of their money, 80 to 90% of their money comes from credit card holders who do not pay off their balance in full every month. This is what you would call a revolver. A revolver just keeps the balance and pays the minimum every month and calls it a day. That's how they make their money. Sometimes we're like, how do these credit card companies just make money lending us money, like giving us credit, letting us swipe? It's because there are those of us who just don't pay it off in full every month. A revolver, it's expensive to be that because you are literally giving them their income. And I wanna show you how you can understand what it's costing you to have the debt that you just listed out. So we're looking at your double digits, the ones that you highlighted, but you can also take a look at the ones that you didn't highlight just to try this out with that. But let's pretend you have a balance of 4,000. And your interest rate is, let's say 17. And then what this is gonna calculate is your minimum payment. First, we're gonna do that, and then we're gonna do fixed payments. So we're gonna look at minimum payment first because we wanna understand, based on your minimum payment, how much interest will you be paying this credit card over the time of the balance that you hold. So let's say your minimum payment is $96 and you're fine with that. The 4,000 balance that you currently have right now, with just paying the minimum payments, will take you, I don't even know how many years that is, but it'll take you close to 250 months to get rid of. And in that time, you would have paid more than what your balance was in interest. Let's just say you have a fixed amount because you were expecting to start paying your student loans in February, and that just got extended. And now you're like, okay, I have $250 extra. So you have $250 extra, your minimum payment is already 96, so you just add that onto it. So let's just say, to make it a round number, let's just say you have $300 to put towards this credit card. Okay, wow, that's a difference. So with a fixed payment, it'll take you only 15 months to get rid of your debt when you pay more than just the minimum. And in that time, you will have paid $464 towards interest compared to the $5,000. This is just a little exercise for you to see, like, the minimum payment is meant to screw you over. That's what it is. Adding even just a little bit, let's just say, let's do 200. Let's do 200. Even just adding or doubling the minimum payment helps you significantly more. So if you can figure out what that fixed amount is gonna be on a monthly basis, you're already ahead of just the minimum payment. So we saw that. It was kind of like a little shock to the system, maybe, I don't know. Is that just me? Now we want to understand the method at which we are going to pay off this debt. So we know which ones we want to tackle now. We're like, definitely want to get rid of this 17% interest rate credit card like right away. Now we want to understand how we're going to tackle it. So there are different methods for debt payoff. There's the snowball, there's the avalanche. If you've been on this channel for a while now, I've talked about them for a while now, but I'm going to give you a refresher. So you need to know, and only you will know, what you prefer in terms of motivation to keep you continuing on this debt payoff journey. If you are going to tackle the highest interest, but also the highest balance first, and you are contributing, and the balance just doesn't seem to go down, and you're going to say, well, why am I doing all this for if it's still at $4,000? So you really want to understand what motivates you and then make the determination. Snowball, avalanche, hybrid of the two. What are these? Snowball is when you start out with the smallest balance first and then you tackle the bigger one. And so the point here is like, you're finding momentum. You're like getting the motivation to really tackle that big one. But along the way, you are seeing debts go to zero because you have tackled the smaller balance first, so that ones that are technically more approachable and more manageable to tackle first. Whereas the avalanche method is you are tackling the highest interest because it's the most expensive debt. Right? It's the one that's costing you the most money. So regardless of the balance, you are tackling the one with the highest interest first. So let's just say we had 3 credit cards. One credit card was 23% APR interest. Number 2 credit card is 17, the example that I just showed you. Number 3 is auto loan at 10%. Avalanche method, you would tackle that 23% first, even if it's got the highest balance, because you know it's the most expensive one. Those are the two. And now the hybrid is when you choose to say, okay, I know avalanche method is actually going to tackle the one that's the most expensive one first, the one that's costing me the most money first. But I also want to be motivated to like keep it going by seeing some debts go to zero faster. Of the different credit cards or debts that I have, I'm going to choose the one with the highest interest, but secondary to that, I'm going to choose the one with the smallest balance. So it could work out that like the highest interest also happens to be the smaller balance, but if it doesn't, then you just work that into how you look at this. So you want to tackle the one that like does have the highest interest rate, but also of the 3, the one that has the smallest balance. This probably works the best if they all have around the same interest rate, very different balances, because then you'll know, okay, this one actually is only a difference of 1%. And so I'm going to tackle it because the balance is actually way smaller than the one that's the highest interest rate. There's a hybrid way of doing this. It doesn't have to be like one way or no way. Keep that in mind because you do want to have a strategy for how you're approaching these. Whatever you choose is your choice, obviously. But before you make a decision on which method you're going to go with, we want to do the calculations just one more time so you can compare how much you're saving and how much you're actually paying when you are choosing snowball versus avalanche. So go back to that calculator, or I can show you a different calculator that could be helpful for you to run calculations on. Okay, so now I'm on Credit Karma. I was on Bankrate. This one could also help you figure out which one to choose, or just like run this exercise after you've figured it out. And let's say, again, you have the $4,000, you have that 17% on one. Let's do monthly payment of, what did we say before? We said 300. It's going to take you 16 months, and that's how much interest you're paying. So you have another credit card. Let's say this one is a higher balance. So let's say this balance is 10,000 and the interest rate is 20. Again, you have 300, or maybe because it's a higher balance, you have more. So let's just say you have 500 here. The thing to note here is that it's going to take you much longer to tackle this one, right? Even if it's got the most expensive interest rate. You're paying less money over time. This one's more expensive, but it's going to take you more time to pay off. So there's things to consider. You want to see like how much it's going to cost you. Now let's see what happens when we do 300. Curious if that changes things. Okay, wow. Yeah, it significantly does. Again, keep in mind the time you have, keep in mind what's going to motivate you, but it's good to go back to these calculators and see like what you have to pay towards and how long that might take you. So run that one more time just so you understand what it's going to cost you to tackle it the way that you're choosing to tackle it. Once you've done all that, once you've figured out which method you're going with, how much it's costing you, and you're happy with like the choice that you've made, you're gonna now need to figure out how much money do you have to make these payments? Because if we're not changing anything about our lifestyle, or if we're not like planning to have extra funds, there won't be extra funds. First thing is listing out your must pays. So this is everything that you need to, regardless of what happens, pay every month. Your rent, your water bill, your heat bill, your credit card minimum payments, like all of this goes into your must pays. And then you're gonna list out your expected monthly income. Then we're gonna do our wants. Like what are the wants that we know come up every month, but they aren't really necessities. So for me, this would be like my Pilates class. I guess my food subscription is a want because technically a need would just be grocery shopping. Like I don't need to do a subscription. Look at things that you're spending money on that are like wants that come up every month and put that there. Like my Peloton is a big want, almost a need at this point. If I needed to get $44 back a month, like I would stop. Once you've listed that out, you kind of have a clear picture of like, what is it looking like on a monthly basis to live the life that you have right now? And obviously we are not accounting for any things that just like come up, right? Like I'm not accounting for like the entertainment that comes up. Like let's not include that just yet. But what we're gonna do with these numbers is you're gonna take your income, subtract that by your must pays. And this total number that you get is your making moves money amount, right? So this is the amount you have to really be able to like continue to like live your life, make goals, set different goals that you have. If we really want to like figure out what it's costing us with our wants, we're going to want to add our must pays and our wants together. We're going to add those. And then we're going to take our income and subtract it by those two combined, right? To understand right now, based on my must pays and then my wants, this is how much I have left over. That's just to give you like some perspective. I'm like, okay, with all my wants, if you still have money, that's great. But if you don't, then you want to figure out what wants are not really wants. That's really how you're going to understand like what you have to pay. My suggestion, or like how I would do it, is I would first use the must pays, and then anything else I would work backwards. I'd be like, okay, after my must pays, I have still $1,000 like left over. Obviously, all those $1,000 are not going to go towards my debt because you still have a life to live. So you can't just say like, I'm going to pay my rent, my gas, my heat, and then I'm going to pay my debt. And that's going to be me for 16 months. No, that's not life. So we do want to incorporate your wants into it, but we're also going to need to figure out which wants are more flexible in removing if we need to find money there. That is where the whole compromise comes when people are talking about paying off debt. It comes when you obviously need to do a trade-off for things that you might want to be putting towards, I don't know, travel and things, and the things that you know you want to prioritize, like your debt. And so you can be debt-free and not have a high interest debt bearing over you. Look through that list, see what can be adjusted as needed. So you got into that point, you've removed a few things from your wants, or you've, minimized certain things. Now we want to really finalize that number, right? We want to finalize that number that we have for a payment to make towards our debt on a monthly basis, right? Because as we saw in the calculators, it's really more helpful when we know we have $500 every month to put towards the credit card versus, I don't know, this month I might have 10, this month, like let's come up with that make moves money amount, right? So the amount that you have left to really be able to put towards your debt every single month. And let's keep it the same. Let's keep it the same. If it's only double the minimum payment, like for one credit card, then that's fine. But let's keep it the same, because that way we can go back to the calculator and figure out how many months it's going to take us to pay it off. Using one of the calculators, the bank rate calculator that I had shared earlier, you're going to work backwards. With that amount of money that you have towards this debt, how many months is it going to take you to pay it off? That's it, right? If it's 16 months, what's 16 months from today? And put that date down. Write it down, put it somewhere visible so you could see it all the time, so you could be reminded why you are putting money towards this. It's because you're going to be debt-free by this date. So give yourself a date. You could also choose, if you maybe have more money in your making moves money account, if you have more money, then you can choose to say, well, I want to pay this off in 6 months. What does that look like? And then work that way. So there was an option for time instead of amount. So take a look at that calculator. The Credit Karma one is the one I'm referencing for that one, desired months to pay off. There you have it. That is really how you make a plan to pay off your debt. Few steps, more than a few steps. It's important to remind yourself that it's going to take time, and you are going to want to celebrate wins along the way. I'm not saying, celebrate them in a way that's going to put you back in credit card debt. Treat yourself. If you enjoy, ice cream or a glass of wine after like a month of doing something that was hard to put the money that you need towards this debt, then celebrate that. Celebrate the work that you're putting into it, because you need to make it fun along the way. And when you hit that milestone, it's going to feel great, because you're going to want to celebrate it in a way that really recognizes the commitment that you made to yourself and to your future self for prioritizing this high interest debt, and just celebrate those wins, because it needs to be an enjoyable process. I hope I convinced you to add that to your 2023 goals if it wasn't already. And I hope I gave you something that you can use when you are mapping out your money strategy for the new year. So I will link all the resources that I talked about or shared in the description. Let me know how this goes. Let's see how this journey is for you. We all have different money goals, but we all should be celebrating the progress that we're making. So I will see you next time.